Senator Ted Cruz just introduced a bill to try and stop Hollywood from censoring movies on behalf of China. He's looking at you, Disney. The act is called the Stopping Censorship, Restoring Integrity, Protecting Talkies Act. And the aim of it is to try and reduce some of that stranglehold that China currently has on our entertainment industry, because our entertainment industry is completely morally bankrupt. So they'll do the bidding of the Chinese government, anytime they're asked. Anyway, what you probably don't know is that it's really common for major Hollywood studios to work with the Pentagon to use our military jets, tanks, naval bases, you name it. When you see in movies, grand military equipment, it's probably because the studio is working with the Pentagon, and in a sense, you kind of paid for that stuff. Like, think Top Gun, right? Or war movies, Saving Private Ryan style. The tech that you're seeing in these movies it's real tech, that the Pentagon has allowed Hollywood studios to use. And by the way, since I mentioned Top Gun, did you know that in the most recent, remake of Top Gun, some things were changed in that movie just to appeal to the Chinese government? It just kind of makes you sick to think about. In fact, as another example, and this is actually Disney related, think the Doctor Strange movie, right? Well, throughout comic book history, which is where a lot of the Disney stuff gets its sourcing, in Doctor Strange, a main central character was a Tibetan monk. Well, now, in the newer Doctor Strange series of movies, it's no longer a Tibetan monk. Why? Because that would upset the Chinese government. Because the Chinese Communist Party, which is the Chinese government, they don't want you to think that Tibet is a place in and of itself. They want you to think that Tibet is just a part of China, annexed, taken over. It's similar to what, the USSR did, right? Where different countries that they took over no longer were those countries, they were just parts of the USSR. It's the same thing, because they're communists and that's how they are. Well, our tax money is in a very real sense aiding in the production of these movies. Because those jets are our jets, right? I mean, that military gear is stuff that we paid for. And Hollywood is using that stuff and at the same time appeasing the Chinese government, is censoring on behalf of China, so that our entertainment industry is completely sold out. At a certain point, it would be no different to be here in the United States, watching what Hollywood produces than it would be over in China. Because, the Chinese censors are there with their cash, handing it out. This legislation would prohibit the Department of Defense from providing access to US studios that censor films for screening in the communist nation of China. Honestly, I think it's awesome. Every major production nowadays seeks the approval of China before, it actually goes live. Sometimes before filming, but always before it actually airs. Why? For cash. Because there's a massive market over in China. Now remember, these are the same actors and celebrities who talk to you about morality, how unbelievably noble they are, so noble that they can tell you who to vote for. They can criticize your decision, because you might be like an evil Republican or something like that. Those people who tell you how moral they are, so moral that you should surrender your own judgments to theirs, those people work for Hollywood studios that censor and rewrite their movies to appeal to the Chinese communist nation that imprisons its dissidents, puts them in concentration camps, murders them, and then steals their organs. Yeah. And since we have this Chinese coronavirus going around, I think it's a perfect time in which the West should be learning something about our reliance and interoperability with China. We should be separating from China as much as possible because, as I think I've made clear, it's an incredibly immoral nation, an incredibly immoral government. We should be separating maximally. We should be ending our reliance on this despotic, evil country for our resources, including for our medical resources. Australia is already starting to do that, and Australia is the West's most China-reliant country, which is not an admirable position to be in. They're rethinking this relationship around the time that China is threatening economic sanctions because Australia had the audacity to investigate the source of the virus. Did it start in a certain lab in Wuhan, for example? It's a question that you're not allowed to ask. Japan, similarly, is urging its companies, the companies of Japan, to try and become more independent, or at least to cease their reliance on China, to try and, separate as much as possible. It's time that our political class in America realize that we should be doing the same thing. We don't want reliance on this evil, despotic nation. By the way, an evil, despotic nation that threatened to cut off our medical supplies. In the midst of this thing, before we even knew what we were dealing with, China was threatening to throw us into the sea of the coronavirus, I believe they said. In their state media, that is the Chinese state media. That's the sort of country that we're dealing with. So yes, I think that our companies should stop dealing with China as much as possible, as soon as possible. And I think it's a wonderful thing that Senator Ted Cruz has put forth this legislation that should stop our tax dollars being used to fund Hollywood as it appeases the Chinese Communist Party. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.